A brutal turning point in the Arab world's forgotten war. In Yemen's capital, Houthi militias blowing up the home of former President Ali Abdullah Saleh after a breakdown of their alliance against the Saudi-backed government. Family sources confirmed the death of the former soldier who first became president of North Yemen before reunification in 1990. We're going to ask about the shifting alliances that for the past week have prompted armed combat in the streets of Sana'a, culminating with Saleh's killing. What now for Yemen? 2 years of alleged Saudi-led bombing campaign against the Iran-aligned Houthis and last month's blockade and reprisal for a missile strike near Riyadh have, according to the UN, brought the country close to the brink of starvation. A country already suffering from a cholera epidemic, a country whose citizens feel like pawns in the regional power struggle between Saudi Arabia and Iran. Donald Trump, whose first trip abroad as United States president was to Riyadh, effectively giving carte blanche to the Saudis. What should the international community do? Today in the France 24 debate, we're looking at what lies next for Yemen after the killing of Saleh. And you can react on Facebook and Twitter with the hashtag F24debate. From the reunification of the country in 1990 to the Arab Spring of 2011 and the current civil war, Ali Abdullah Saleh played a central role in Yemen. Whatever happens, his death marks a turning point.
This
is the Houthi leader, Abdul Malik al-Houthi, congratulating the Yemeni people for the killing of former President Ali Abdullah Saleh. The Yemeni strongman was killed by fighters who reportedly stopped his armoured car with an RPG and then shot him dead. Earlier, they targeted his house in the capital, Sana'a. Residents in the city reported intense fighting. NGO and UN workers are trapped, surrounded by it.
Last night was one of the most intense, fiercest fighting in the city, as well as airstrikes and shelling.
On Saturday, Saleh announced the end of his alliance with the Houthi rebels, with whom he has jointly ruled the capital for 3 years.
I call on all the Yemeni people, in all the cities, all the provinces, all the districts and neighborhoods, to take a united stand to defend the revolution and the republic against this group who have been irresponsibly playing with the Yemeni people for the past 3 years.
Saleh dominated Yemen's heavily armed tribal society for 33 years, before quitting in the aftermath of the Arab Spring uprisings in 2011. He made common cause with the Shiite Muslim Houthis against the internationally backed President Hadi. But Saleh and Houthi vied for supremacy over the territory they ran together, including the capital Sana'a. Their fraught alliance burst into open combat last week, a new conflict in the Yemeni war, which has claimed the former president as its most high-profile victim.
Let's begin in London with diplomat Fawaz Al-Rosas. Thank you for being with us in the France 24 debate. We also want to welcome from Washington, Fatima Abo Al-Asrar, senior analyst at the Arabia Foundation. Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you. Fawaz, let me begin with you. What was your reaction first when you heard last week that there was the end of this alliance between Saleh and the Houthis, and then, of course, the news that came in today?
Thank you first for having me. Actually, I was not surprised. I was waiting for this, move from him, because everyone was expecting this, especially after what the Houthis did. I mean, they are controlling all the ministries. They are. I'm sorry to say that they are stealing money. They are, taking the Saleh's party as just, they are doing everything behind them. So Saleh's party gave them the legitimacy to rule the country, and what they did, was not what they agreed on. So I was expecting this, but not this time. I was expecting this maybe, let's say, at least 3 months ago, or maybe 4 months ago, but not now.
What was the last straw in your view? What made their alliance unwind?
I think Houthis took a decision to end this alliance maybe 3 months ago, at the end of August. And who knows? Maybe they had an agreement with Saudis, or maybe with other regional power. Who knows? So what they did was, I mean, just a way to show that they really wanted to end this alliance between them. And if we just remember what they did, at the end of August, they were about to kill the son of the former president, and they killed one of his closest, security counselors, Khalid Radi. And they attacked many ministries under the, that belonged to their allied Saleh's party.
Fatima Abu al-Asrar, you also were expecting this alliance to crumble sooner?
Actually, it was interesting just seeing the events unfold. The Houthi and Saleh alliance was not any alliance that was based on any ideological platform. Both of them were together only in what is described as a marriage of convenience. The Houthis needed Saleh's support to somehow institute some type of legitimacy. They both came together to fight the Arab coalition and stand against the Arab coalition. So it was merely just a political alliance out of political expediency. As the Houthis were seizing more power, and they were marginalizing the General People's Congress Party, which is Saleh's ruling party. And as the events unfolded recently, as we've seen, it has just been a gradual discord between both of Houthi and the Saleh forces. Initially started with the August 24th march and the rally of the 35th anniversary of the GPC, which the Houthis saw as a huge sign of insubordination by Saleh, and became extremely suspicious of his motivation and party's motivation after that.
Well, let me ask you about that, Fatima, because here you have a master tactician, and we'll talk a little bit more in a moment about Ali Abdullah Saleh's many lives throughout the history of modern Yemen, who in the end is forced to flee his home and is shot down with his motorcade. How do you explain his demise?
The Houthis have amassed power for the past 3 years. They have been backed by the Iranians, and
but someone who's that sly, how could he be? How could he misjudge so badly?
He is sly, but he kept losing power. Saleh alliance with the Houthis did not bode well for him. It did not bode well for the country. I would say both Houthis and Saleh are not actually in any good position right now. Both of them, I mean, of course, Saleh is now assassinated, but the Houthis are not in the best position either. In this war, the Houthis had everything to lose, and by virtue of their alliance in the past 3 years, they have come to know everything about Saleh, everything about his forces, everything about their camps, and everything about where he potentially could hide. But then what was really interesting is that the Houthis have done something which was more sly and more cunning. They have actually, targeted the tribes around Sana'a in an attempt to weaken the tribes and weaken the sheikhs so that they cut off all types of support for Saleh. And by this, Saleh was definitely cornered in his home. The Houthi militia warfare has, I think people don't give them enough credit, but they did fight, with Saleh for 6 rounds of war since 2003. So I think that's something that we need to remember and just, be mindful of. The Houthis are a force to contend with.
For more, let's go to Sana'a and journalist Hussein Al-Bukaidi. Thank you for being with us here in the France 24 debate. First of all, what's it like right now in the capital? Is the fighting continuing?
No, it's really quiet now in Sana'a, especially after former President Ali Abdullah Saleh fled his compound in central Sana'a. There was a heavy Saudi airstrike at that time, targeting Houthi position which they have taken from Ali Abdullah Saleh forces. But now in the street of Sana'a, there are like present of Ansarullah, the Houthi checkpoint and armored vehicles in many areas, especially the surrounding area of Sana'a. But all streets now are opened, main street are opened, just except the street in Ali Abdullah Saleh compound. They are still closed, but the security situation, I think, now is much better than before.
How do you explain today's events?
Sorry, can you say
How
it
do you
again?
explain today's events? The bombing of former President Saleh's house, his killing in that motorcade. What happened?
Ansarullah, the Houthi, from the beginning of this fighting 72 hours ago, they started with the outskirts of Sana'a, securing all roads and all army bases that was seized by Ali Abdullah Saleh fighter, and they get the circle like really close around Ali Abdullah Saleh, taking the home and the position in a Sab'in area, and the home of his son Ahmed Ali, who is now in United Arab Emirates. And by I think 9 o'clock this morning, they completely kind of surrounded Ali Abdullah Saleh compound. And when he fled that compound, we're not sure how did he get out. It seems to be that he might have got help from outside, that someone had some armored vehicles ready somewhere, and I think that he has maybe used some of his tunnels to get into those armored vehicles. But at that time, I think 2 hours before his death, there was a mediation between Ali Abdullah Saleh compound and Ansarullah, the Houthi, to mediate for Ali Abdullah Saleh to surround himself to a third party. While they were doing that, they were surprised that Ali Abdullah Saleh has actually fled in a convoy with armored vehicles, and they have stopped him in an area in Khawlan, west of Sana'a, east of Sana'a. He was in the road as it reported to Marib. They refused to stop for the checkpoint, and then there was a huge fight there using RPG and heavy gunfire, which is resulted at the end in the death of Ali Abdullah Saleh.
And how do you explain, you heard there a moment ago Fatima Abu al-Asrar saying how on six previous occasions former President Saleh had fought against the Houthis, then they made that alliance in 2015. How do you explain the fact that this alliance has now crumbled, Hussein?
Of course, now the alliance with Ali Abdullah Saleh and his close loyalty has ended now. But still,
why?
The GBC
why has
parties,
it ended?
Ali Abdullah Saleh
Why has it
party,
ended?
We know that Ali Abdullah Saleh's speech 2 days ago, when he has called for a new page with the Saudi-led coalition, and as well he called the Yemeni people to take up arms against Ansarullah, the Houthis, and as well they have cut many roads. So he was the one that have actually started a big war, and it seems to be that
Why
he
did he
had
do that,
a
in your
plan
view?
with the United Arab Emirates and the Saudi.
Why did he do it?
He did that because he thought at one point that he was ready to take over, so he can make a new coalition with the Saudi. As you said, like he had a coalition, he fought Ansarullah, then he had a coalition with them, and then now he fought them. So this show you that is Ali Abdullah Saleh actually who tried to take advantage of anything, because when he had a coalition with Ansarullah, he fought Ansarullah. So it's them who accepted his coalition, and some people used to say Ansarullah they should not have a coalition with him. And when you declare a kind of a war against your a party that is in coalition with you, this means that Ansarullah, the Houthi, has no other hasn't got anything else to do, only to fight back, or the country will collapse and the Saudi coalition could enter and occupy the whole country.
Fawaz Al-Rossas, do you agree that Saleh thought he could get the better of the Houthis?
I personally think your guest in Sana'a is adopting the Houthis version of the situation. Actually, we all saw what happened at the end of August. When the Saleh's party were celebrating the 35th, anniversary of their party, and we saw that they were about to kill his son, and they paralyzed all his ministers, all his assistants, and then what happened? According to what I heard, according to what I personally think, what happened was that they were about to they made it very clear many times that they think the guy is going to have an agreement with UAE or with KSA, which is not. I don't think it's true, because the guy made it very clear even before yesterday. He said that stop the war. He was calling upon the KSA and the Saudi-led coalition, stop the war, lift the blockade, and then we can discuss all other issues. So he made it very clear that there will be no agreement with them unless they stop the war and they lift the blockade.
All right, a shift there that led to ultimately his downfall. We're going to have to take a very quick break. We'll be right back. Stay with us. You're watching the France 24 debate.
Sure.
Tech 24, presented by Julia Seeger and Danonjay Kadilke.
New technology, the latest innovation and its impact on a digital society.
Tech 24 on France 24 and France24.com.
Reporters, presented by Mark Owen.
The world's first climate refugees flee the Caribbean island of Barbuda, since devastated by Hurricane Irma. The authorities took the unprecedented decision to evacuate the entire population to the neighbouring island of Antigua, where they are now living in makeshift accommodation.
The larger countries have not quite stepped up. They are really the profligate users of fossil fuel. So clearly they are contributing to climate change, to warmer seas, more frequent and ferocious storms or hurricanes. And at the same time, we're not seeing that type of responsibility in terms of assisting in loss and damage.
Our reporters have been to meet some of those who have returned to the devastated island and still hope for support from the international community.
Reporters on France 24 and France24.com.
Welcome back. Before we resume our debate on the killing of Yemen's longtime former president, Ali Abdullah Saleh, some of the other stories we're following, including the major one out of Brussels, which is, well, deadline day, but no deal on Brexit negotiations to move to the next phase. Theresa May promises further talks before the end of the week. She has to confer with the Northern Irish DUP party, which objects to the agreement to keep the land border as it is with the South. 10 Maltese suspects also in the news today. We're looking in Catalonia and the leading Catalan separatists to remain behind bars, including the number 2 of the dissolved regional government. This is the official campaign for snap regional elections is about to open. 10 Maltese suspects in custody over the October 16th car bomb murder of investigative journalist Daphne Caruana Galizia. And with a partial recount nearly complete, Honduras' incumbent president clings to a slender lead. The opposition continues to cry foul over a mysterious halt in the count, after which momentum shifted. There have been at least 3 killed since martial law was decreed and a curfew 10 days ago. Welcome back, or welcome if you're just joining us. It's the France 24 debate. We're speaking on the day when a mainstay of Middle East politics for decades has been killed in Yemen's capital. Ali Abdullah Saleh We're talking about the former president whose alliance with Iran-aligned Houthi militias had crumbled in the past days. 125 killed in Sana'a in street combat since last Wednesday. We're talking about it from Sana'a. Journalist Hussein al-Bukaidi, welcome back. Welcome back as well to diplomat Fawaz al-Rosas, who is with us from London. In Washington, Fatima Abu al-Asrar, from the senior analyst at the Arabia Foundation. And for part two, we welcome from New York, Peter Salisbury, senior consulting researcher at London-based think tank Chatham House. Welcome to the show. Let's talk a minute about Ali Abdullah Saleh. He rose through the ranks of the military during North Yemen's civil war, was elected in 1978 at the age of 36 by Parliament as North Yemen's president. He stayed on after the reunification of the country in 1990 with the Arab Spring. He was pressured out. He agreed to stand down early in 2012. Now, just before stepping down, Saleh sat down with France 24's Abdelhakim Zamouche.
As far as I'm concerned, they aren't really revolutions. This is chaos, rather, Arab chaos, creative chaos, admittedly. These protest movements are supported by small states in the region that lack influence. They are trying to assert themselves. And, of course, these countries are sending mercenaries, troublemakers of all kinds. But in reality, these governments are not supporting Arab revolutions.
Let's go to Peter Salisbury in New York. Peter, in 2011, when then-President Saleh granted that interview to our channel, it was the Arab Spring. It sounds like the country he's referring to most there is Qatar. And yet he wound up, that would have been perhaps music to the ears of the Saudis, yet he wound up siding against them. What happened?
Well, Saleh is a tricky, or was a tricky character to say the least. He was always maneuvering, always trying to find the edge that would keep him in power, and in this case, bring him back to power. And I think the calculus really was to create a situation in which he was the least bad option for them. In 2011, they had let him down. They had told him to step down, especially after he was very badly injured in the bombing of his mosque. And then later on, he maneuvered his way back into power, and he realized that he wasn't really their favored person. And he decided that he'd work with the Houthis and create a situation in which if anyone wanted to cut a deal, it would have to be with him.
Saleh, who had many, many lives.
Yeah, he was the ultimate survivor, or until today was the ultimate survivor, really, in Arab politics. You could point to Bashar al-Assad, but he's really sort of a newcomer to the scene. Saleh survived a great deal. Famously, in 1978, when he became president, the CIA predicted that he wouldn't last 6 months. He made it for 33 years as president, and he almost maneuvered his way back into power.
Almost maneuvers his way back into power. Peter Salisbury, what's your take on why his alliance crumbled with the Houthis?
This was only ever a marriage of convenience. Saleh's calculus, I believe, was that at some point he would have to split with the Houthis, but he wanted to make sure that he got the best possible deal. And the issue for him was that that deal never really came. And structurally, on the ground, what ended up happening was the Houthis did a much better job of consolidating hard power than he had anticipated. And he'd been planning for this moment, I think, for quite some time, planning his split from the Houthis, but he wasn't getting the offer, he wasn't getting the edge that he wanted. And for the first time, really, in 40 years, a gamble didn't pay off.
So with Saleh dead, which side stands to gain, if you will?
Well, that's a good question. Now, what was expected over the weekend was that the Saudi-led coalition and Saudi-backed Yemeni forces would really press the advantage with this infighting happening in Sana'a over the last couple of days, we've seen the Houthis gain the upper hand. We've seen them really seemingly consolidate their control over things on the ground. Yemeni tribes who were expected to come and fight against the Houthis stood back, waited to see what would happen, didn't enter the fight, and I doubt are going to start an uprising against the Houthis now that Saleh is out of the picture. And again, we've got this issue of the coalition having spent years saying that it plans this big military push into Sana'a, holding back and not doing anything. So if there isn't a military push on one of the key front lines in the coming weeks and months, there's a real opportunity here for the Houthis to consolidate control internally and actually come out of this stronger.
Actually come out of this stronger. Fatima Abu al-Asrar, let me ask you, certainly the killing of former President Saleh sends a message to any tribe or clan that might want to turn against the Houthis.
Absolutely. It's really interesting as we watch the events unfold in the past few days. One of the unexpected turn of events was that Saleh had overwhelming support from the resident of Sana'a, and same with, different political, basically his political party, and he mobilized, attempted to mobilize tribal leaders, and had support that was unprecedented since his fall and his ouster in the Arab Spring. Even he solicited the support of the Arab coalition and was granted that support. And it's quite significant. I think that's really quite significant to look at. And also understand that this support came because people have been really fed up from the Houthi rule. The Houthis have committed egregious violation in Sana'a and in Yemen as a whole, and continue to be influenced by the Iranian agenda.
Fed up with the Houthi rule, but also fed up with those Saudi-led airstrikes, which have killed so many civilians.
Well, it's important to absolutely. It is important to understand that the Houthis have instigated this and have instigated the involvement of the Arab coalition, and everybody saw it as an opportunity to stop the proxy war between Saudi Arabia and Iran, and just have it battled out in the Strait of Sana'a between the powers who are in Sana'a and who could battle it out. I mean, it's kind of difficult to fight a war if you're not in Yemen. And at the moment, the only entity that was able to do so was Saleh and Saleh's forces. So the situation looks quite, unpredictable in the next, few days, few months to come. And it's sort of like, it's really important to think about the role of the alliances that can come. If the GPC is going to mobilize fast enough to produce a leader that could bring the tribes together, and if the Arab coalition would be supportive of
what does that mean, be supportive?
Sort of like a solution.
What are you expecting?
So it's supportive for some type of a leadership that can come and actually thwart Houthis in Sana'a and completely, remove them or have them withdraw to Sada. The Houthis' rule has been extremely repressive, and it is not one that Yemen is content with. And I think this is the fundamental point here.
Hussein al-Bukaidi, what's going to happen now?
Now I'm sure, like after Ali Abdullah Saleh is gone, Ansarullah, the Houthi, will have more control on their own areas they control, and it might, some people might think this sound weird. Their position has got stronger. It's just as simple as that. If you have two head chefs in one kitchen, things will go messy. So when you have one, he will be in full control. And I just wanna your guest before the break, when he said about the 24th of August, the celebration of Ali Abdullah Saleh party. He said he was adopting the Saudi-led coalition point of view, because there was no problem before that celebration. But Ali Abdullah Saleh, he tried to send message to the people of Yemen that this celebration and big gathering in Sana'a was actually directed to inside Yemen, to Ansarullah the Houthi, because they were talking about the wages. We will do that. We will go to Sana'a. We will have a protest. We will set up tent. And that's why Ansarullah the Houthi had a problem with him, because they said, how come we are in a coalition and then you're doing that? If you're not happy with it, he have the parliament, he should withdraw from the government, he should withdraw from the so-called high ruling council. He could even use the parliament, which he is totally controlled, to dismiss the government. But what he did actually, he asked the Saudi-led coalition to open a new page. Of course, he said to lift the blockade and to stop the war. If he have done that, only that, that will be great. But in the same time, he called up on the Yemeni people to go out to the street and to fight Ansarullah the Houthi. They have cut many roads. Ali Abdullah Saleh supporter cut many roads into the front line. They cut roads in Al-Bayda, from north of Sana'a, south of Sana'a, in Marib. And those areas are really, really important for Ansarullah the Houthi to send supplies to this area. So it seems to be, and it was clear that Ali Abdullah Saleh was the final card that the Saudi-led coalition had, and they have used it yesterday, I mean the last 72 hours. But what have, as we say now in Sana'a, what have broke the camel back is Ali Abdullah Saleh's statement declaring war, calling for the Saudi help, and this has actually made a shock inside tribes that are loyal to Ali Abdullah Saleh, because they many of their sons, homes, children has been killed by the Saudi-led coalition, and they have suffered a lot like any other Yemenis, like the Houthi as well. But at one point they did, that's why they didn't fully support Ali Abdullah Saleh, because he was trying to flirt with the Saudi-led coalition, and which he actually miserably failed.
All right, Fawaz Al-Rosas, hearing from the previous two guests, neither Iran nor Saudi Arabia very popular among Yemenites after the horrors of the last couple of years. At this point in time, what's going to happen? You heard there Hussein talk about how the Houthis' stance is perhaps stronger after the death of Saleh.
Sure. If you just allow me to explain something, what happened was during the last 4 days, actually the Houthis, as they always do, in all the mosques and streets in Sana'a, they like to paint everything with green color. So this is what they wanted to do in the famous mosque As-Saleh in Al-Sab'in district. So they were stopped by the guards of the mosque. And then, because of that, the Houthis sent their, their fighters to, to the compound, the Saleh's compound where he lived, where he used to live, let's say, and they started the battle there, in his own area. So he cannot. I mean, imagine people surrounding your own house and trying to kill you. What are you gonna do? So this is what actually happened. And because of that, Ali Abdullah Saleh found himself forced to end the alliance. So what is going to happen? To be honest, I don't really know. But now the battle is going to be between Houthis and the people themselves. Houthis, have been stealing money. They stole all the money from the central bank. They are stealing everything. Houthis, when they had this fight, when they had this battle with Ali Abdullah Saleh, they were fighting him with all the capacities of a state, a government, because they seized power in September 2014. They seized everything. I mean, I'm talking about the
right. But what's going to happen next? You're talking about 40% of the population when you're talking about the Houthis.
I think there are some scenarios. What they are going to do, one of them is, I think they might go into, let's say, direct negotiations with the Saudi-led coalition. And this is what one of the Houthi leaders said this morning. He said, without even any condition, he said, we are ready to have a negotiation, direct negotiation with Saudi Arabia, without even mentioning the war against Yemeni people, without even mentioning the blockade that is killing hundreds of people every single day. And this is one scenario. The other scenario is people might take action. Who knows? People might take action, because even this morning there were some demonstrations in some streets in the south of Sana'a, in the Sittin street and some other streets this morning. So there are, some scenarios, but what is going to happen? I don't think it's going to be in the favor of Yemeni people, because Houthis are like a trigger. This movement cannot live without have its own fighting. It cannot have a political status, if you want. This movement cannot live in normal circumstances. The only way for this movement, for the Houthis to live, is having their own battle.
But it's understandable if they're being perhaps bombed by the Saudis all the time. The sense that there's a siege mentality on both sides, it appears. In the middle, as you say, Fawaz al-Rosas, are civilians. The United Nations warning, we're talking about a nation of 25 million, where 20 million are in need of assistance. The UN, which warns that last month's blockade could lead to full-blown famine. Let's listen to one of their representatives in Geneva.
That blockade has been partially wound down, but not fully wound down, and it needs to be fully wound down if we're to avoid an atrocious humanitarian tragedy involving the loss of millions of lives, the like of which the world has not seen for many decades.
Of which the world has not seen for many decades. Peter Salisbury, of course, another variable in all this is neighboring Saudi Arabia and its new crown prince, Mohammed bin Salman. How is he going to react to the news of Saleh's death?
Well, that's a very good question. And obviously the working thesis for most people looking at Yemen is that some kind of deal had been worked out, and that it was based on the precondition that Saleh had to publicly and visibly split from the Houthis. The idea being that Saleh splits from the Houthis. He then starts working alongside Yemeni forces backed by the Saudis to defeat the Houthis. With Saleh out of the picture and it unclear as to whether his forces are still in a position to challenge the Houthis, we now end up in this situation where it looks like, and it's still too soon to say, but it certainly looks like that move has backfired quite spectacularly. And instead of having two different parties in Yemen who are kind of jostling for influence and want to deal, MBS is going to have to deal directly with the Houthis in the future in order to work out a deal. But
and will he do it? Will he do it, or will he do it, or will he continue down the military road?
Well, this is what I've been hearing, is that he now believes, and especially after this missile launch into Saudi Arabia in November, he has been sort of saying that he thinks that Saudi Arabia's only approach is to. The question then becomes whether or not that statement was based on the idea that Saleh would eventually join his side. So I'd imagine that MBS is some disarray right now, and then the question becomes: are the Yemeni? All
right, the connection getting worse there with New York. Just quickly before we go, Fatimo Abu al-Asrar, you're in Washington. What about the Trump administration, which effectively has given carte blanche to the Saudis since Donald Trump became president? What would you like to be seeing Washington do?
Just before talking about the Trump administration, I wanted to just go back to your previous point. Saleh was never really a reliable ally for anybody, including the Saudis. But they seized an opportunity. There an opportunity to defeat the Houthis, and that was quite critical. So they were ready to support him. Whatever would have come next was not something that, it was just all a matter of projection. So, and also we should not forget that, yes, the Houthis have launched a missile into Saudi Arabia, but only yesterday they talked about, an attempt to launch another, or, successfully launching a missile into United Arab Emirates, and had other false rumors broadcasted all over social media in order to say that they're a sovereign country and that they will stand to the Arab coalition. This does not instill confidence in any. in any of the Arab coalition countries, and you know, it will continue. The standoff between the Houthis and the Arab coalition will continue. In terms of the Trump administration, I would like to say that the support for the Arab coalition has began since the Obama administration. You know, it was backed up by 10 Arab countries and the UK and the United States. The objectives at that point were to come to a quick resolution to this. But as we have seen, it needs more fighting on the ground to actually be able to get rid of the Houthi forces.
All right, that opens up another debate. Unfortunately, we're out of time, whether or not who will be the forces to do that fighting on the ground. Fatimo Abu al-Asrar, many thanks for joining us from Washington. I want to thank Hussein al-Bukaidi in Sana'a, Fawaz al-Rossas in London, and Peter Salisbury in New York. Stay with us. Media Watch is next. And we say hello to Nadia Mossi. You heard it there, our panel deeply divided over what's the best way forward.
That's right, and that's a reaction, as you'd expect, very much that's been happening online as well. But before we get into the reaction to Saleh's death, I wanted to first of all talk a little bit about what was happening online before his death was confirmed. Now, we know that the war in Yemen has long not received the international attention that perhaps it should have done, and there are many complicated reasons for that. One of those is that the borders with Yemen to the outside world have largely been closed. That's meant that refugees haven't been able to come into Europe on Europe's shores, like Syrian refugees, for example. But it's also meant that journalists have not been able to get into the country, and that's meant that there's been a proliferation of fake news in Yemen. And we saw that very acutely in the past couple of hours before it was absolutely confirmed that Saleh had been killed. So first of all, this was the scene that greeted us if you were watching Arabic media and you were trying to understand what was happening. Now, on the one side here you have Al Arabiya, that's a Saudi-funded TV station, and they're saying Saleh is not only alive and well, but he is leading the battle in the Yemeni capital, Sana'a. On the other side, you have an Iranian-funded TV channel in Arabic, Al-Alam, and they're saying Saleh is dead. And that sense of misinformation comes not just from these very polarized media outlets, but also from analysts and commentators who don't have a particularly clear allegiance in this war. Here's one, Adam Barron. He's a very well-respected commentator on Yemen. He points out that he said there was plenty of doubt to be cast upon the idea that he had been killed. Another analyst, again, somebody very well-respected, saying very explicitly the reports of his death are false. Now, the point here is not to admonish analysts who didn't believe that he was dead, but just to point out how difficult it is in Yemen
to get
first-hand information, and to what extent, as well as there is a war on the ground, we also have this ongoing media war. Now, once the footage did emerge very graphically that yes, Ali Abdullah Saleh, the ex-president of Yemen, had been killed, there was a sense online of trying to sum up really what this meant for Yemen, and there was one tweet by a Yemeni journalist that I thought did that relatively well. She said, Saleh's death, shocking, not just because he ruled Yemen for over 30 years. He's been a key player in every major event since being ousted. To many, the future seems scarier, not because he would have ruled better, but because nobody knows what it would look like without Saleh. And if you were to try and attempt to there have been many people online, at least, who've tried to sum up Saleh's life and give an obituary in 280 characters on Twitter. And this from Jeremy Scahill, the journalist, I think is one of the best that I've seen. He said, Ali Abdullah Saleh danced on the heads of snakes, played all sides, backed by the Houthis, waged war on the Houthis, worked for US interests, worked for Iran's interests, worked against the US interests, helped Al-Qaeda, killed a lot of Yemenis, quite a life. And that is, I think, a really good way of conceptualizing what's been really quite an extraordinary couple of hours online. Now, there are those who say that this is the time, really, if we can, now that Yemen is trending on Twitter, to try and highlight the humanitarian crisis that's happening in the country. We have here another Yemeni journalist. She says in Arabic, hashtag Ali Abdullah Saleh is trending on Twitter. Maybe now people will start to pay attention to what's happening now that it's newsworthy. And her words coming, of course, as we've seen in the past couple of hours, an even further deterioration of events in the capital. We understand that maybe over 125 people have been killed. People, for the moment, blockading themselves in their houses, trying to do what they can to remain safe as this violence kind of moves street to street. But if I was just to, I wanted to sum it up, if I could, with one final tweet, and that was about the ideas that Saleh himself was almost perceived invincible within Yemen. He survived multiple assassination attempts. I think there's one here by Joyce Karam that sums it up quite well. She says, Ali Saleh was good at one thing, surviving. The man was hit by an RPG and made it in 2011, survived several assassination attempts after that. Until you walk in his funeral, you may never be sure.
Nadia Massi, many thanks for that. And our coverage of Yemen will indeed continue here on France 24. I want to thank our panel and thank you for joining us here in the France 24 debate.